risk and needs so much more help at this time. So very much in our thoughts as we enter the session today. So again, thank you for joining us. A couple of housekeeping things. If you can keep yourselves on mute. We've got a large number of people that have joined us today, but we'd love to have your questions as we go through. And there's a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And as our panelists are speaking today, we'd love you to put in questions so we can pass those to the panelists. So joining me today, we've got Sally Rogers, who's the founder and principal consultant at Digital Gold. Sally's got a background in digital design and marketing, but is a real champion of digital inclusion in regional Victoria from just outside Wangaratta, and is a huge champion for the needs of individuals, not-for-profits, as well as small businesses. So thank you very much, Sally, for joining us today. We've also got Jess Perrin, and Jess Perrin's the head of social innovation and digital inclusion at Info Exchange. She's also a member of the ADIA Governance and Strategy Committee, and I think it's probably fair to say has spent most of her career on collaborations to solve social justice issues and digital inclusion. Thank you, Jess. We have another Jess joining us. Jess Wilson is probably well known to you all as the National Director of the Good Things Foundation. A not-for-profit social change organisation working to improve the lives of people experiencing disadvantage through digital, and again probably well known as the lead running the Be Connected network in Australia. So thank you, Jess, and we've also very fortunate with us Teresa Corbin, who's the co-founder and CEO of ACAN, the Australian Communication Consumer Action Network. And Teresa's campaigned for many, many years, decades, probably longer than she would like me to say, on the issues of communications and equality for individuals, not-for-profits, and small business. So thank you all for joining us today, and also a bit of a thank you and a shout out to a couple of people who have worked really hard behind the scenes to bring this session together today, and that's Ishtar and Ben, who are the conveners of the Australian Digital Inclusion Alliance, and without their work, this session wouldn't have happened today. And Ben's working hard behind the scenes, keeping all of the technology running during this session and monitoring the chat window and Q&A. So I was going to spend just a couple of minutes setting the scene, and then I'm going to open up to each of our panelists, who's going to talk about what they're seeing and available to answer your questions. So a bit of scene setting. I think COVID-19 is clearly presenting challenges for everyone across Australia right now. That's a bit of an understatement, and I think terms like unprecedented don't really have any meaning anymore because they're just heard all the time. But if you think about the challenges that everybody's facing, and particularly those in vulnerable communities, and particularly those that are digitally excluded, when we're kind of in an era where government is presenting a lot of information online, when we're dealing with the challenges of school kids having to do their school from home, many for the first time, people without either internet connections, without devices, without skills, are really missing out even more than ever, and that level of disadvantage really being exacerbated in the current time. Whether that be connecting with family and friends, whether that be accessing education, all of those things. And so many of the traditional places and groups that people would go for support from digital inclusion have unfortunately closed their doors in this time as well. So libraries and neighbourhood houses, for example, which would often be the places that people would go, are also closed, which just further adds to the level of disadvantage. So I think we've all got an enormous challenge ahead of us. But on the flip side to that, I think it's been incredible to see the response from the sector, from industry, from across governments over the last month or so. And from my own perspective, I just think so many of the initiatives that have been recently announced would have just been unimaginable only say 2 months ago. I think industry kind of led early with a lot of response, so that the telcos, Telstra, Optus, Vodafone, a number of other telcos as well, leading on programs like giving people free unlimited data at home on their home internet connections as they've moved to working from home, giving people free additional data on their mobiles. Telstra in particular has been working with state governments to give mobile SIMs and free data to school students across the country. Google, who was a founding member of the ADIA, as well as a number of other tech companies, have made a whole range of technology available free of charge to the sector during this time. And then just last week, ACAN and has been really responsible for this. Teresa will talk about it later, but an amazing announcement from NBN, a $150 million package to help connect low-income households to the internet, particularly to address the issues of homeschooling, but also to help small business and not-for-profits. And again, it's kind of unimaginable only a couple of months ago. These are the sorts of things we've been campaigning for a very long time. Government as well, kind of keen to address these challenges, and we've been reflecting that, you know, oftentimes to get access to some of our senior government ministers, it would take us weeks or months to get in their diary for a discussion. And at this time, we're having ministers call us directly from their mobiles, saying, you know, what more can they be doing to support, whether that be the Communications Minister, Paul Fletcher, that Teresa and ACAN have been working very closely with, whether it be Anne Ruston, the Social Services Minister that we've been working with, Good Things have been working with, whether it be Stuart Robert from Services Australia, and all of the associated departments and PMO. It's just been amazing to see their willingness to engage at this time, and I think their genuineness in asking, you know, what needs to be done. From an ADIA perspective, we've been engaging with Prime Minister and Cabinet and the Digital Technologies Task Force, who are focused on obviously the COVID response, but they're also looking at some of the longer term issues around digital skills in the community. It's been great to see the states come on board. Again, unimaginable. You know, we had the Victorian Education Minister come out a couple of weeks ago saying that no child in Victoria will be without a device or internet connection for their schooling. And I think there's a bit of work to be done to make that into a reality. But those kinds of statements that have been coming from state and territory education ministers across the country. And I think our challenge is going to be, after the COVID-19 period, after say the next 6 months, how do we sustain some of these initiatives? So if we've managed to get more people onto the NBN, we've managed to solve some of the device issues, working on some of the skills issues, how do we sustain that so it remains as a top priority for government moving forward? And I think that's a role that the ADIA and everybody on this call can play. So then there's the work of the community sector, which has just been incredible, kind of led by some of our peaks like the Australian Council of Social Service, ACOS, the Communities Crisis Cabinet that's being led by the Community Council of Australia, that have been supporting all of these initiatives around digital inclusion and really supporting the needs of the not-for-profit sector over this time. And that's probably a great segue into the panellists that we have today. So I'll pass over soon to our panellists, and I think Sally's can provide an overview of what Digital Gold's been doing in regional Victoria and how organisations are adapting on the ground. Jess Perrin's going to talk about some of the work that Info Exchange has been doing, some of the insights from Ask Izzy, and looking at moving some of the traditional skills and employment programs that were previously delivered face-to-face, moving those online. Jess Wilson's going to talk about similar work, kind of moving digital skills programs online, and I think maybe an exciting announcement from Be Connected and some new grants that are available. And then Teresa Corbin's going to help wrap all of that together and particularly talk about the work that ACAN's been doing with NBN and with the telcos and with the federal government as well. So I think moving into the panel, I think we're going to give each of our panellists so 7 or 8 minutes to talk about some of the things they're seeing on the ground. You know, what's impactful, what's working, you know, what are some of the gaps, and then sort of what do you think some of the things that could be done in the medium to long term. And after each of our panellists, we'll then have a break and go through some of the Q&A that might be coming through. So encourage you again to please click the Q&A button that's on the bottom of the screen, and please type your questions as we're hearing from our panellists. But I'd now like to introduce Sally Rogers and invite Sally to come off mute and let us know what's happening in your part of the world.
Hi, how you going? For those that haven't met me, I'm in northeast Victoria in a little township called Oxley, which most of you won't have heard of, but a lot of you would have heard of Brown Brothers Wine. So if you picture Brown Brothers Winery, they're just the next village along, so a nice little walk or bike ride for me. quite an idyllic setting to be in isolation, and I'm one of the fortunate ones who is actually connected, even being in a rural town. So yeah, very lucky. And the rural city of Wangaratta is the local council up here, and they've been doing a tremendous job with their limited staff and trying to respond to the community's concerns, business concerns, modify their own services. So the team there has been under enormous pressure to digitally transform. And everything that David has talked about is so true in terms of the access, affordability, and connection. Some of us who are connected are experiencing wonderful new opportunities. There's so many new education opportunities, businesses that are reinventing themselves, getting themselves online, community groups sharing messages of mental health and positive messages. We've got family and friends and community groups putting positive messages out there as best they can, sharing. So there's a lot more time for new connections and positive stories. There's been so I've made a few notes because there's so much happening, and but there's a lot in our community in the smaller townships of rural city of Wangaratta. A lot of us aren't actually connected, so a lot of us don't have access to mobile coverage or the NBN. So a lot of people are restricted to just telephone access. So when we're working with organisations and businesses, it's great that they can be super responsive if they've already got online tools available. So if they've got online shops and Facebook pages, they can create sales and great messages very quickly and respond quite well. But there's a lot of people that they're not able to reach with those. So it's just being mindful, those organisations, of reaching by other traditional means. So the local newspapers, but again, not everyone can get to the news agency or buy a paper. So radio is actually obviously is quite a good option for a lot of people and often gets forgotten in this world, but that's a really good way to get messages through to some of those. Also, we can become quite reliant on email messaging out. It's good to also consider SMSing. Some people find SMSing in a marketing sense can be quite invasive, but in terms of communications, not everyone is able to have an app on their phone because they either don't have the device, a smart device. Some people, even if they do have a mobile phone, only still have a traditional, the original model that they bought. So not all of them either have a smartphone or a smartphone that can fit a new app on it. So just for both businesses and community groups to be mindful to use their think about SMSing, radio messaging, they're the sort of things. But some of the positive things, so a lot of people have reinvented themselves. So the Wangaratta Library, we're very fortunate they've done some wonderful things, opening up access to ancestry.com, opening up access to digital storytelling. So to the kids in the library, there's story time. They're doing terrific things. The Wangaratta Digital Hub, so traditionally their idea was that people were able to walk in and get some help with their device. Well, they're doing their best to help people over the phone. So they're now making themselves available over the phone for people that need to call up and help, people that are discovering their device for the first time or are looking for help to buy a new device. And wonderful stories of small quilting groups who are now using WhatsApp groups and Zoom calling, and so age is certainly no barrier. It's which is terrific for those that again are lucky enough to be connected. But some of those, it's certainly highlighting the gap for those that are not able to connect. So other places are doing great things with the community houses. We're very fortunate. We have a Be Connected partner in Panorang Community House. And again, they're doing some terrific stuff with their preschool. The preschool teachers have been able to create some activity packs for parents to come and collect and take home. And that's great for some parents that don't either have printers or can't afford to print at home. So there's a lot of assumptions that people have printers or can afford the ink for their printer. So it's quite quick to assume that everything's on screen, but it is nice to do some of those tactile craft activities. And a lot of those communications largely in this area have been Facebook. So whether it's business, whether it's community, a lot of the messaging is coming via Facebook. And there's a lot of new groups being formed so that people feel like they have a bit more of a private discussion going on. So probably the only obstacles have been people concerned about their security, jumping online if they're using devices and things they've never used before. There's obviously a little bit of a fear factor for that. But certainly more people are jumping online faster and with more excitement than they have before, just because they're so eager to reconnect with people. So yeah, or just some of the businesses that are doing it. I mentioned Brown Brothers before. Not only do they have wine, but they've now reinvented their restaurant, and you can actually have Brown Brothers meals, Epicurean meals delivered to home, which is, yeah, only $15 a serve for these wonderful Epicurean meals that would normally be reserved for a very special occasion. So there's some wonderful things. Millawa Bread, Millawa Kitchen just up the road, are now even milling their own local flour, and so selling new staple foods that weren't previously available. So there's wonderful things happening. Local cafes producing takeaway meals. Florists are now delivering gift baskets, and a lot of small businesses have taken it upon themselves to start delivery services, which they hadn't previously. So there's been some really lovely new services being offered. Most of those are available in what I call the city of Wangaratta. Some of the smaller satellite villages don't all get access to that. So all those sort of wonderful things of businesses taking a step back and looking at how they service their customers rather than relying on the customer to walk in. So it'll be interesting to see how they maintain that beyond COVID, how many of those become a permanent service or not. And the ones that have been able to really jump ahead are those that already had invested in digital assets. So that goes for community groups and business groups. If they already had a website, they already had some online tools, and their Facebook pages and an audience have been able to get their messages out quite quickly and readily. Unfortunately, some of those that haven't got those tools and are now desperate to get those tools, trying to find local professionals to be able to make that happen in a very quick period of time. Unfortunately, the demand is outstripping people that can service those. So unfortunately, I've had to say no to a lot of people and or redirect as much as I'd love to help everyone. Yeah, the demand and urgency, not able to service everyone. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sally. And yeah, I think that demand and urgency is something I think we've probably all seen. But I clearly live in the wrong part of Victoria. I'm probably not within the catchment zone of getting these free meals from Brown Brothers. These free meals, these $15 meals from Brown Brothers. And you've got a couple of questions, and encourage people to please type in some questions for Sally. But one of them along those lines was from Keith saying, I presume that Brown Brothers delivers wine with the meals. And,
what was that, sorry?
The question from Keith was saying he presumes that Brown Brothers is delivering wine with those meals as well.
Oh yes, they complement the meals beautifully. Well, why would you not? No.
Exactly, and I think the other slightly more serious question from Karen was asking about the digital hub and asking if that's a free service, but maybe just an opportunity for you to talk a bit more about the digital hub and the work that you do with the library in Wangaratta. Yeah.
Yes, it is. That Wangaratta Digital Hub is quite new to Wangaratta. Only been there maybe 12 months. And the setup of that was very fortunate. There was a building space became available next to the library, and some state government funding became available. So currently there is someone employed a couple of days a week. They do have a Facebook page, so they have some terrific updates on there on what they're able to do and offer. And there's a phone number there currently. So normally you'd be able to drop in if you're in the Wangaratta area, just next to the Wangaratta Library. But at the moment, you're able to give them a call and they'll be able to talk you through if you've got any challenges. And likewise, the Panorama Community House also offers help with getting connected over the phone.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thank you. If there's any other questions for Sally, please put them in the Q&A. There is another one on a more serious note from Keith. Are you seeing examples of businesses that have just had to stop trading because they don't have connectivity?
Yes. So some have chosen just to close things up. A lot of people, unfortunately, in our area, we also had the bushfires earlier in the year. So some businesses, they're now going into months of downturn and have just had to shut up shop, unfortunately. So some of the support that's coming with COVID is, unfortunately, is too little too late, for some being on the back of the bushfires also. So no, it's not, unfortunately, it's not good news for everyone. There's some small businesses that have been able to carry on their staff or reinvent their staff fast enough to hold on. But unfortunately, there's plenty of unemployment also happening this way, where if equipment and things, it's all very well if you're in the food industry, but unless the food chain, or depending which industry, if the chain of product can't come through, they're not able to continue to work. So yes, there's certainly, unfortunately, a lot of unemployment here too.
Yeah. And just probably a final couple of pieces there, and then we'll move on to Jess Perrin. But so one was a comment that Libraries ACT have just launched an online support team of 6 permanent staff, which sounds fantastic.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah.
And the other question from Rosalind was around any tips about talking people through digital issues over the phone, that one of her colleagues has been trying and finding it a bit difficult. It sounds like my experience trying to help my parents with
it is very hard. Yes, it's very hard. It's much easier face to face, and to be able to show the device, literally pick up the phone and show it. So if somebody hasn't actually learnt a video conferencing like this, where you can show, it is very challenging for both the teacher and the student to do that without the visuals over the telephone. So all I can say is it takes patience. Be patient, and you will both get there, and it can be done. It can be done.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thank you again, Sally, and hopefully you can stay with us, and we'll have time for some final questions at the end as well. And just, there was in the chat window, Sally, there's Eleanor from Gibbs Tech who's saying she'd love to connect with you because they're having a very similar challenge in Gippsland.
Great.
She's put her email address in the chat window for you there.
Fantastic. I will respond.
So thanks so much, Sally, and please everyone keep the questions coming as each of our panelists speaks. I think we're going to move next to Jess Perrin, and Jess Perrin's going to give some insights from an info exchange perspective on what we've been seeing across our program. So over to you, Jess.
Great. Thanks, David. And I mean, I couldn't agree more. What an incredible time to be talking about digital inclusion the world over. It's quite remarkable to consider the drastic leaps that have been made in the past month alone. And I think while we, of course, welcome these steps, and for many of us have been advocating for them for a long time, I know many of us, especially the panellists today, are mindful of how we can maintain this momentum and ensure specific groups aren't left behind. So today I'll speak about some of the work Info Exchange is doing in this space, and also share some insights from what we're hearing in the community, and also some similar conversations to what Sally is having. I'll start with Ask Izzy. So Ask Izzy is an online service directory that connects people in need with housing, a meal, money help, family violence support, counselling, and much, much more. It's free and anonymous, and it's powered by over 370,000 services across Australia. So it has a very strong national reach. Now, for over 4 years, Ask Izzy has been a vital information source for communities experiencing vulnerability to help them find a meal, help them find a bed for the night. But we have been absolutely staggered by the huge spike in demand over the past couple of months in Ask Izzy usage, with essentially us doing nothing to promote it. So in March, the past month, we had our highest ever month of usage with 250,000 searches for support. I know David said the term unprecedented means nothing, but again, for us, that's nothing like we have ever seen before. And to capture the gravity of that situation, the most common searches that we were seeing were, unsurprisingly, Centrelink, money help, and I think that the one for me that always brings it home is food. People looking for food relief, people looking for things like Oz Harvest and where they can access free food for their families. Now, often people ask me when I talk about digital inclusion, what does that have to do with Ask Izzy, which is a digital product? For some of you who may have heard me talk about Ask Izzy before, I often talk about Ask Izzy as being one of Info Exchange's most powerful digital inclusion tools. And so it was designed for people at risk of or experiencing homelessness. This is a group of people traditionally without a reliable internet connection, generally with significant financial barriers concerning connectivity and skills, lacking in skills to make the most of online offerings. Now, this audience is still central to who Ask Izzy is today. As a result of working really closely with this audience, Ask Izzy was designed to meet the needs of this audience in the simplicity of its design. For example, a really great example of that is not an app. Instead, it's a mobile website. So if we were to produce an app, even if it was free, there are significant barriers for people to download. So in the App Store, for example, even to download a free app, you have to have a credit card that you've listed in the App Store against your name. And you can imagine how difficult that would be for people without a fixed address. So that's one example. Another example is Ask is meter free on the Telstra network. A Wi-Fi connection to Ask Izzy. You think about two.
Sorry, Jess, I think we're losing some of your audio. You maybe just pop off your video for a second, or maybe it will come good.
Let's try.
These were the challenges we warned of at the beginning of this session, but we'll let you know.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you well now.
Okay. So when we think about this from a design perspective, we're addressing here affordability challenge and accessibility issues. And this is through a product, not just something that is in the ether as a skills piece. And I think for us, while its usage over the past
Sorry, I think we're losing Jess again.
On these calls. On the positive side, the usage we're seeing on Ask Izzy is helping to inform some broader policy initiatives and illustrate where best we might be able to leverage further support. So understanding some of these vulnerabilities that people are experiencing and seeing how they're using Ask Izzy can hopefully help us all plan in the future. Now, I'm just going to get a nod from our panelists. Is my voice still okay? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up from David. I'll try to come back on video shortly. I also wanted to share a great phone call I had yesterday with the wonderful team at the South Australian Public Library Service, who have been doing a brilliant job connecting with their communities and moving to online offerings. I particularly have to give a shout out, and I could see that he's a participant, to Ben Teo in Marion Library, who has been doing some awesome online Lego programs for kids. So David, one to write down for your kids at a later point. But what we're seeing is there is some pretty cool stuff happening out there, and Sally mentioned some of it. We're also working with those libraries to think about how we can move our face-to-face learning digital skills program, Digital Springboard, online, and looking at how we can lift the capacity of staff and volunteers in the network to do this. Jess Wilson will speak a little bit more about what the Good Things Foundation is doing in that area, but we're kindred spirits in trying to direct that work. Now, interestingly, one of the things that I found from chatting with the Libraries Network is that they are seeing similar things to what we are, and certainly what Sally is also seeing about those people who rely entirely on libraries for an internet connection or a device. Highly likely to be some of the most vulnerable groups, I would suggest. So how are they being served during this time? I know Teresa and Jess will speak to this after me, but it's a pertinent reminder of ensuring that we're advocating for those who continue to fall behind at this point in time. And speaking to that, I thought I would quickly share an example from one of our employment programs. So we run a program called Tech Ready in partnership with a number of TAFEs across regional Victoria and the Victorian government. Now, in short, Tech Ready helps young people, many of whom come from disadvantaged backgrounds, to gain digital skills they need for jobs of the future. We support them every step of the way in this program by funding tuition for a Cert 3 in Information, Digital Media and Technology. We link the students with industry professionals, and we support job placement. Now, in some ways, the students of this program are actually very fortunate by the virtue of studying an IT course. They have the skills to be able to meaningfully engage online, and that's what the TAFEs have moved to at this point in time in our program. But as I'm sure you can appreciate, the situation is not without its challenges. Many students are finding it really difficult to study online, especially if they're in a precarious living environment at home. They're struggling to get into a routine, finding motivation and self-discipline, and that's assuming they have a reliable internet connection and a device. For a number of our students, they didn't have a device that they were able to use and were relying on the ones at TAFE. Critically, and I think these are some of the questions that we haven't kind of yet grappled with as we go through this digital inclusion piece, is the mental health issues that we are seeing, the impact on the students. And as expected, it's the most vulnerable students that are finding this time most challenging. So far, we have had 2 students withdraw from the program after coming back from the holidays a few weeks ago because they said the demands are too much on their mental health to try to do it at home. And our expectation is that we are going to see this increase across the program. For us, these stories, that the library positioning of who is helping people who aren't connected at all now, and hearing these stories firsthand from students really willing to engage, who want to be working with tech, who just can't find the way to move forward. To me, it just illustrates the importance of the conversation we're having here today and what digital inclusion is going to mean for the wave of people experiencing vulnerability across Australia. It's really multidimensional at this point in time. So I guess my thinking is for us, we need to buckle up. And while the attention is on digital inclusion now, we need to keep pressing on this agenda to make sure that those who perhaps have the most to gain from being digitally enabled are able to benefit as this situation rolls out.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jess. And your video and your sound is working well again now. So we just had a temporary dip in the internet. So please, everybody, put in any questions for Jess. There's a couple of questions there already, Jess. The first, which is partly a comment, but I'm sure a question as well, and something I know we all feel in the territory. Very serious problems in remote communities regarding connectivity with telcos, but then also issues around food and essential delivery. And the comment is hoping one day it will be sorted. But whether you've got any comment either from a food and emergency relief on Ask Izzy or from some of the connectivity, Teresa might be able to talk to some of the connectivity later as well.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear from Teresa on the connectivity piece. We work really closely with a number of the food delivery services like Oz Harvest and Food Bank, and I've heard discussions before around the challenges in those communities, and it is something that I think is confronting for all of us. We, as part of Ask Izzy, that the powering service directory of 370,000 services lists some of these availabilities, that the ultimate, I guess, issue here is that there's not enough at this point in time. So to agree, I hope one day it's sorted too, and that day being sooner rather than later in light of this crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's a lot of advocacy at the moment from ACOS and others to the federal government to really step up some of that provision of services in the Northern Territory and funding for ER and food services in particular. There's another question there from Keith around, have you had much success in extending Tech Ready to people with cold backgrounds, so culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Absolutely. So that is part of the cohort who we are working with. So at the moment, we have programs in Wangaratta, Shepparton and Geelong. And we have a really diverse group of students participating in that program from all walks of life, and certainly those from cold backgrounds are included. And, you know, some having really, really great success and going on to find jobs, which is the whole point of our program. So yes, that's part of the remit.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any final questions for Jess that anybody wants to pop in the Q&A? So there's another one there for you, Jess. How wide is the Ask Izzy network, and does it reach into regional areas?
Huge. So when I talk about those 250,000 searches, it is all across Australia, and the information in the service directory touches all across Australia too. So it's worth having a look. For those who, Ask Izzy is kind of a tricky one to figure out how to spell. So if you want to have a look and see if your area is included, which it should be, look at www.askizzy.org.au, askizzy.org.au. But it is a national service directory. It is powered by Australia's largest health and welfare directory, which is owned by Info Exchange. So it should touch all areas.
And then one final question for you, Jess, from Sharon around how do you ensure accessibility for people with a disability? I'm not sure that's on Ask Izzy or just more generally around digital inclusion and some of the programs.
I'll speak to the Ask Izzy component on that. So on two fronts in Ask Izzy. So we have designed Ask Izzy, as I mentioned, with people with lived experience of homelessness, some of whom in those cohorts are living with a disability, to help inform our design. So we think about that from a design perspective, and the content we use is largely easy English. From a technology perspective, we have our product is developed in-house. So we have a team of developers who sit right next to me in our Melbourne office who specialise in this area. And we work to certain standards and are always working to improve accessibility requirements. So it's something we're really front of mind of, and we do the best we can.
Fantastic. And then I did say final question. One last question, and it's from Jacob saying, Ask Izzy is such a great service. In the current times, are you still providing physical resources to people as you used to do with the charge packs, with the prepaid charge packs? Yeah.
First of all, thanks, Jacob. It's nice to hear. Yes, so we still do our power cards, and we distribute them largely through service providers. As you might expect, service providers have recently kind of stopped asking for as many because they may not be having their sessions open, or they may not be able to distribute them, but it's certainly something we are still doing. And I think at this point in time, it's really critical to make sure that people have charge on their phones to be able to connect to services.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, thanks again, Jess, for joining us.
Thanks, David.
Appreciate it, and hopefully you can stay with us, assuming your internet keeps up, for any final questions at the end. But I'd now like to pass over to Jess Wilson, as I say, the National Director for Good Things Foundation, to hear about what you're seeing on the ground, Jess, and what you're doing with your programs.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Jess and Sally. It's been, I know we've spoken already this week, but it is always inspiring to hear about the other work of other people across the sector that everyone's doing. And I know that there are a lot of people on the call today that are also doing amazing work out there. So big thanks to you for all that you're doing. I would just like to acknowledge the country on which I'm on today, which is Gadigal country, Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'm in Sydney in Newtown, so coming to you from there today. Hopefully, I don't yet have NBN here. So hopefully my ADSL will stay live with us today. So I thought it'd be really important for us to talk about, so as David said, the Good Things Foundation is the National Network Manager for the Be Connected program, which is focused on supporting older Australians to thrive in a digital world. And I guess we also run a Health My Way program, which is a digital health program focused on supporting people to understand better manage their health online as well. So, I mean, those two programs are essential, I think, in terms of the response to COVID-19. So we've been doing quite a lot of work around responding to that, making sure people have all the right information. But clearly, as most of you know, a big part of both of those programs is actually face-to-face delivery by community organisations out to people in their communities. And as Sally's already talked about, as we've heard from some of the chat panel and from Jess, most of our community partners about 4 weeks ago had to stop all face-to-face delivery. And so, I mean, that is a huge issue for us. I think certainly one of the things that has come out of the Be Connected program over the last 2.5 years that we've been running it is that it's not just actually about the digital skills that people learn. That's really important as part of this program. It's actually the social connectedness that they have because they're meeting people in their local community, they're learning something new together, and they're coming together. And so that was a major concern, I think, for us and certainly for our community partners. Because for older Australians who are most at risk from COVID-19, they were very quickly told that they needed to stay inside. So for people not having great digital skills, maybe not having a device, it's a major concern, I think, for them. And so I think one of the things that we were most interested in is well, what are our partners doing? We needed to understand what actually was happening out there on the ground. So we did, I think 3 surveys in 3 weeks. So apologies to anybody in the network that's on the call, because I know that was a lot of questioning at the time. But really what we discovered is it changed very quickly, as it did for everyone. But our last survey, about 50% of our network has basically closed down. So they've got 3,000 partners across the country, 3,000. So 50% of them were just decided they can't do anything right now. But 50% of them said that they were either already delivering digital skills programs online or they were planning to. And so could we help them do that? So I think a big focus for us has been around developing new resources, delivering webinars, developing tip sheets, connecting people about how to actually do this. Because as has already been said, talking to people about how to start a Zoom call when they don't know how to use digital is really tricky. And as you said, Sally, lots of patience, lots of time. But I think that the most inspiring thing for me over the past 5 or 6 weeks has been seeing how wonderful and how creative and how passionate those community partners are about continuing that support for people in their community. They do not want people to be isolated. They don't want them to be lonely. They want to make sure that they're doing that. So, I mean, some of the things I think is a bit of a hybrid, that there are people doing fantastic Zoom calls. So I've got, Trisha Pye from down in the Tech Exec in Maria had 28 people on Zoom the day before Easter singing I'm at the top of the world all together. And those people had never been on Zoom before. So, she and her digital mentors had spent time getting people connected, making sure they could do it. And then watching the joy on people's faces was just outstanding. So I think, connecting people, making sure that they're doing that stuff was really, really important. I think though, some of the neighbourhood houses as well, I know we've already heard some of the fantastic work that's happening out there, but for Kate from Rokeby Neighbourhood House down in Tassie was talking about how not only are they trying to keep connected with people digitally by live streaming their cooking classes and their singing group, so that people can have something to do all the time, but they're also doing offline things too. So that stuff about calling people, and also dropping around isolation packs that has information in it. So people know where they can get the right information. So I think, and I know Sonia Moon, I've seen you ask a question already. So I know, Sonia, you're there from Tasmanian Libraries. So I know you guys are doing amazing things and have been for a long time as well. Hi, Sonia. It is incredibly inspiring to me, the way that the community sector is responding. And I think we really need to take our hats off to everybody that is doing that, because it's really awesome really, to do that so quickly. I think though, you know, the other key thing from our perspective is, you know, Be Connected has the eSafety website, beconnected.esafety.gov.au, has amazing resources on it that help people to learn how to use technology. I mean, there's resources on there that talk about how to set up an iPad. So if somebody gets a new iPad and they don't know how to do it, there's video instructions on how to do that. So I think that the balance between having those fantastic online resources and the face-to-face or now digital support is really, really key to this, and really important at the time. The other thing I wanted, I suppose, to talk about was the digital health program. So we were rolling out a digital health program, again, face-to-face, just started before COVID-19. 70 community organisations across the country delivering this program, looking really great, supporting people to understand, you know, how to use apps and things to manage their health, and to look at, you know, how to use my health record. And one of the most important things that we talked about in that program is how to understand and get the right health information. And so when COVID-19 started, I think that became one of the most important things that we were doing and supporting people to do, and having a lesson plan to support organisations to know how do you teach people about how to get the right health information for you. And so I think that's certainly one of the things we've been working really hard on, is making sure people have access to those resources that we've got, that the Australian Digital Health Agency has developed as well, that will support people to know how to do this. Because, and I know we've already talked about some of the things that have happened, you know, just like that we didn't expect all this time ago. Telehealth is one of those. Like, all of a sudden, you can have telehealth appointments with your GP, and it's on Medicare. Like, that's just incredible. It hasn't happened like that so quickly before. So I think that's amazing and wonderful. And as David said, it's one of those things we need to make sure that these kind of movements forward are the things that stay in past COVID-19, and make sure that we're able to support that. So I think that's really important. I think, you know, in terms of health information as well, and it's that piece around digital media literacy and making sure people are able to critically analyse information that they get. And I think that's a really important piece of the work that the community partners do as well, and one of the things we're really thinking about, because, you know, the government's now encouraging us to download an app to track where we're going and all of those things. And so, you know, that might be a fantastic thing, but people need to be able to understand what an app is to start with, then how to download it if you've got a device to do that, and then actually think, well, what does that actually mean for me and my privacy, and do I want to do that, and does that make sense to me? So I think, I mean, all of those things are really, really important, and things that our partners are supporting people to understand. I think that probably the other thing I just wanted to touch on as well is that clearly we've already talked about devices and access to data, and I know Teresa will talk a lot more about that when she's talking. But in our survey as well, 75% of our network said to us that one of the barriers to them continuing supporting people in their community is that people don't have a device. So they don't have as Sally was saying, they don't have a smartphone, they might have another phone, they don't have a computer, they don't have a laptop. And so that's something that I know is not just about older Australians, it's also about, it's also about people who are trying to teach their kids at home, as David's saying. So I know there's been some action in that in other places and in some states that's happened. But we have worked with the Department of Social Services to create a new grant for Be Connected partners, and it's $1 million for people to be able to purchase devices to loan out to people in their community for the period of COVID-19. So we're really, really excited about that, to be able to respond to that in that way. You do need to be a Be Connected partner, so to be able to access that, and also be delivering programs. So it's not something for everyone, but it is absolutely about making sure that that support can continue to happen in the community. And I mean, our response to that has been absolutely incredible. I think we sent the newsletter out on Monday, and we have, a 53% open rate of that newsletter, which is just a lot more than we usually get. And and we've already had over 100 applications, and it's only been open 2 days. So I think that, to me, says that that's a real need in the community, and I'm really glad that we're able to do something about that. I think in terms of the future, I think this is the time for all of us to work together, to be talking about how important digital inclusion is. People get it now. They actually understand why this is an issue, because they can see it. They can go, oh, right. So if people don't have a device, they can't speak to their family. Oh, right. So I think now's the time for us to be working really hard to say, yes, and these are some of the solutions, and these need to continue beyond COVID-19, because that's really, really essential to make sure that, as Jess has already talked about, as Sally's already talked about, people who are not in employment now, that when they come to looking for a job later on, that they have the skills and confidence they need to be able to do that. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jess, and well done, and congratulations on getting the $1 million grant fund up and running for devices. I'm sure everybody on this call, if they haven't already applied, you might have another, I can see on the call at the moment, 104 people. You might have 104 more.
That's it.
Devices to programs. A couple of questions coming through. I might try and combine a couple of them together. One set's from Deb Forward, talking about challenges people with an disability. And she's asking about, kind of the challenges people face over the phone, and then telehealth, and then also when you go to government websites, it's often using icons which are difficult for people to understand, and maybe tying into May, I hope I've got that pronunciation right. Your mob in remote communities really having trouble accessing the electronic health record through the government website. So just I guess any commentary that you might be aware of in terms of what government's doing or what you're doing through some of your programs to help with that.
Yeah, look, I think Deb, you and I both know that very well that people with intellectual disabilities certainly find digital technology can be quite challenging. Takes a lot of time and support to be able to do that. We have actually developed some resources with the Centre for Intellectual Disability here in Sydney around supporting people with intellectual disability, how to access health information, and particularly around our Health My Way program. So I can definitely share some of those learnings with you. I think the key thing, as we know, is that it takes time. It's a lot of patience with people, and it is about making sure that as much information is in pictures and videos and clear, easy information. So that is not a government website strong point. We know that. And so I think that's certainly one of the things that we continue to work with our partners in government on, to make sure that the information is accessible as possible. Sorry, what was the question from May? Sorry, David.
So it was just around their communities in the territory are finding it really difficult to access the electronic health record, and just find the government website a little confusing and frustrating, as I'm sure all of us do from time to time.
Yeah. Look, the My Health Record, it's not an easy one, and you do have to go through MyGov as well. But we do have a lot of resources on how to do that, May. So certainly happy to be in touch with you, get one of the team to be in touch with you about the resources we do have. And I can put a link to our resources on our Be Connected network page, where you can see all of the health resources we have, all of the resources around how to deliver digital skills digitally. We've started developing a whole lot of things on there, tip sheets, etc. So I'll put that in the chat panel after I've finished, and make sure that you've got access to that, and to the Be Connected website as well. And I'll put our phone number. Our team is still, although all working from home, still managing the helpline, and so very happy to talk to you about the support that we can offer to help people.
Fantastic. And I think that probably will answer Keith's question, which is where you can find more information about your digital health program. And maybe a final question from Chris Wilson, which is around whether you've thought about the devices having prepaid SIMs in them, and that libraries in the US have been looking at doing that.
Yeah, actually, sorry, Chris, I should have mentioned that yes, the devices do need to include data. So either a prepaid SIM or a dongle, depending on what devices the community partner decides on. It is definitely one of the things we know needs to happen because people might not have Wi-Fi close to them. So definitely need to have data as part of that devices. I know also that our colleagues in the UK at Good Things Foundation have launched a devices.now program over there as well, where they're trying to get 10,000 devices or 100,000 devices to people across the UK. I know they've already delivered 1,000, so to people in need over there. But it's the same model that it needs to have that kind of prepaid SIM involved in it, so that people have that data to be able to access the internet. I think the other thing is the expectation for this is that people then provide that ongoing support as part of this program. So it's not just here's a device and off you go. It's here's a device that already has the app that you need downloaded on it to connect with me, so I can support you remotely on how to learn. So that's definitely part of the program.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jess, for joining us. And your ADSL held out well. So, the internet is still working.
Yes.
But fantastic to have you join us, and hopefully you can hang around as well for any questions that may come in through. And probably a good segue into Teresa. There's just a question in there which Teresa might pick up through her commentary, because I know it's something we've been looking at. But Natasha, I'm assuming from Yarra Libraries, Natasha is saying there's a huge demand for iPads and the sorts of devices Jess was talking about, but lots of stores are out of stock at the moment. So kind of some of the supply chain issues, which I know we're all very conscious of. But yeah, I'll pass over to you, Teresa, and thank you, Teresa, CEO of ACAN, for joining us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just want to acknowledge the traditional owners from the land on which I'm presenting from today in Randwick, the Gadigal people and the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. It's great that ADIA has organised this forum at such a pertinent time. The sorts of things I want to update you about relate to the impact on the telecommunications network, the sorts of plans and assistance packages that the telcos and NBN have put in place, and then some comments about the gaps and where to next. So ACAN, as you know, has been advocating for affordable broadband for a long time. And sometimes I feel like, it was like a glacial pace, it was so slow, it was very frustrating. And it's actually, I looked back, it's been 10 years that we've been pushing really hard. And in the last 2 years, we've pushed even harder, and we've actually had an initiative going called No Australian Left Offline. And we've been advocating that the government should provide a concessional service, or NBN should provide a concessional broadband service for fixed services, because there's a significant difference between people that can only access by mobile and people who've got a fixed connection, because they can access more data, they can get a better speed, and generally speaking, they have better digital inclusion rates as a result. And so we know that the biggest reason for people not to be connected is affordability. There's something like 2.5 million households in Australia who don't have a fixed broadband connection. And we know that 1 million of those households, it's because they can't afford to be connected. So, I mean, having said that, in that 1 million, there'll be some people who've chosen to have a mobile, and so they won't necessarily be completely disconnected, but their connectivity is limited. So this has been a really perfect storm for us. The reality is that we already know that those most vulnerable in our community are not connected, yet we're all being forced to do telehealth, do education online, work from home, and access government services like never before in a digital first paradigm, which we all thought was going to be something that would be in the future, but suddenly it's hit us at breakneck speed in the last few weeks. And it's been wonderful for those that are connected. They're already experimenting with new things and learning great new skills. But for those who aren't connected, there was just this absolute screeching halt to what they were actually able to do. And the reality really hit home that many kids were actually going to have to stop schooling. And I heard some terrible, terrible stories leading up to the end of term 1 about, you know, the actual fear and anxiety that many teachers, many kids, many families were actually facing. And so that led to us having a really significant impact on trying to get together a lot of the different community sector groups to really raise these issues with the Minister and with NBN, and bring forward some of the work that they had been saying was in train in relation to affordability. And I must say I'm really pleased with the result. And I have to say, this is also in a context of a time in which the actual amount of activity on the network has increased something like, I think the stats we got the other day were 25% higher traffic on NBN in the evenings and 49% higher traffic during business hours. So NBN automatically increased its actual capacity to retail service providers for free by 40% very early on in the piece. And this was largely gifted through the network to make sure that people the network didn't fall over and that people were staying connected. It also is a time in which customer service centres are significantly impacted by the telcos. So a lot of them are overseas. They've had to shut their call centres because of lockdowns in India and the Philippines, and really severe lockdowns. And also this has meant that they haven't been able to process a lot of consumer requests as quickly as possible. And they've also had to shut some stores. So it's really important before you send anyone to a store to actually make sure that it's actually open. There are still stores open, but they're just not as many. So last week, NBN finally announced that they were going to initiate a $150 million package to ensure that small businesses and low-income households would stay connected during this time. And so what they announced was that they were going to provide a free connection to low-income households who have children in education, or people in education who don't have a connection at the moment, who don't have a broadband connection as of the 1st of March. So this is completely new users, which is really significant. The RSPs, the retail service providers, have got until next week to come back to NBN to say that they're going to offer plans. So we already know Aussie Broadband is going to do it, and Superloop, and both of them have actually decided they'll waive equipment costs from what we understand. But we don't really know a lot of details about the plans yet. And the plans will be promoted through schools, but we're also quite keen to promote them through not-for-profit organisations that are supporting families and who are getting emergency relief and getting other assistance. And there are quite a few of you out there. So really important to hear from you in the next little while. Basically what this means is that the connection will be free, but of course the issue about devices comes up once again. I also just want to say, before I go any further about what to do in relation to devices and what we still need to do, is that on our website, we've actually got all the information about what assistance packages are being offered by the telcos. Most of them are offering additional data. Some of them are offering a free call amount for overseas calling. And a lot of them are also making sure that financial hardship is easier to access. Now, having said that, take that in the context of what I said earlier about call centres being affected. It might be hard to get through, and it might take longer for a financial hardship package to get approved than it has previously been. So just reassure people you're working with that this is, you know, not a problem. They just need to keep on it. And NBN has provided some assistance to the RSPs to ensure that they can make sure that job seekers are not disconnected during this time, and nor are people who are in financial hardship. And so this has been quite significant, and the Minister actually for Communications put out a statement last week of the key principles that they want telcos to adhere to, and they've agreed on this with the industry to make sure that people are not being disconnected, that debt collection is deferred during this time, and making sure that everybody understands that our connectivity is critical at this point. So the response from the telcos has been, you know, multifaceted in that regard. So talking about equipment, it is a problem. It's a problem because, firstly, people can't afford to buy equipment. Secondly, even if they could, there's actually only a limited amount of equipment that's actually available in Australia right now, because as you can imagine, a large amount of that equipment comes from overseas, comes from China. So the supply chains have been significantly interrupted. We've put to the Minister that perhaps there's a coordinating role that he could play to bring together all the different areas where there is equipment in place or available, or even potentially people who want to donate equipment that could then be rebirthed and used by people in need. We're still in discussion with the Minister in that regard. The other thing that we've done, which I hope we can publish soon, is we've collated all the different information from the different education providers. I'm just trying to get it up on my screen because I have not memorized all of this yet, which is basically to go through and see what is happening with state education departments, because they're all approaching this a little bit differently, public schools differently from independent schools. So that makes it quite difficult. However, there are device loan schemes in place, and the only state that we think there is none is Tasmania. So hopefully they'll make some announcements soon. And a lot of them have also made interesting arrangements with telcos. For example, New South Wales and Victoria have got arrangements with Telstra to provide loan tablets and SIMs. So it will be worthwhile you checking out this information, because this is it's one thing to get the connection from NBN. That's a huge step forward. It's another thing to make sure that the equipment is actually in people's place, and it's not just the tablet or the PC, the laptop. It's also the router or the modem, depending on your living circumstances. So we've still got a way to go with this part of it, but if you're interested in what the community sector have been asking for, our joint letter is up on our website. We have a little tab on our website on the front page that says Telco COVID-19 responses. So you can go on there, we're updating it daily. Another thing that NBN's done is for remote users, is they've made it possible for people to upgrade from the Sky Muster standard plans to Sky Muster Plus if you are educating children. And the benefit of Sky Muster Plus is you get more data, there's less restrictions on and off peak, and also there's more unmetered sites. And one of the significant unmetered sites or unmetered services that is being provided is video conferencing. So of course you can't do streaming Netflix, but of course you will be able to Zoom if you need to. So clearly we've still got quite a lot to do, but I have to say we've made some massive steps forward. A lot of these initiatives are only in place until June or September, and so they're time limited. We've got a lot of work to do to make sure that we actually really, during this period of time, can assess the demand quite clearly and then demonstrate the benefit and the cost benefit analysis to the government and the NBN and the telecommunications providers going forward. We strongly believe, and I know most of you would agree, that if somebody is connected as a child growing up and has a great connection, then gets the digital skills they need, gets the sort of job and education that all Australians deserve, then they're going to go on and become NBN users, and it's going to expand our usage overall. So from our perspective, it's a good business proposition overall. Anyway, I'll finish there.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Teresa, and wonderful, wonderful work that you and the team at ACAN have been doing. I can't even think how you would begin to imagine to remember all of that information from all of the states and territories, but somehow you've been in contact with them all and have been pulling all of that together and advocating for on behalf of everyone on this call. So thank you so much. I think there's a few questions. Coming through. One might be around the eligibility of the NBN deal. So it's talking about younger people who find themselves living in older people's homes and are often very isolated, and again, kind of don't have access to other devices or connections.
Thank you. I've got a note here to talk about eligibility, so I'm very pleased that someone picked that up on me. Okay, so initially they were saying, oh, to be available to people that qualify for family tax benefit A and B. We said it should be broader than that for obvious reasons. Young people who are vulnerable are often getting youth allowance. Pensioners are often supporting their grandchildren. There are any number of different permutations and combinations of low-income families. And so what's been good about that is that NBN has not made it prescriptive, and it will be up to the RSPs to implement with some flexibility. So you know, this could be problematic as it gets rolled out, but bear in mind, this is a sort of program that's been thrown together in a matter of weeks, not months or years, as is often the case with other plans. And so, you know, we're very pleased that they've gone with the flexible approach. And if that is not the case, when we actually find it's being rolled out in the first week, it starts from the 1st of May, by the way. If it's not the case by then, if people are identifying need that's not being met, then please let us know, and I'm sure we'll pick up that advocacy.
Fantastic. And there's a couple of questions around both the Northern Territory as well as remote communities generally that might not have community schools, and so again, kind of eligibility and whether that moves into the discussion you were just having on satellite access and SkyMaster.
Yeah, I think definitely, and I think there possibly needs to be some further follow-up on this. So maybe what I can do is put up my email address, and if you could send us the email details, then we'll get you in touch with the people that need to be talking to in NBN, because what has been amazing about this is actually finding some really committed people in NBN that actually really do want to increase the digital capability, which is their mission of Australia. And it was such a nice hookup to be on last week when they finally told us these were the details, because you could see that there was people in NBN who are genuinely committed to helping this happen too.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Teresa. And a question probably be answered by the same piece around registering properties on the NBN rollout map if they don't show up. So just maybe providing your contact details. And I think just generally what we'll do post this call is I think Ben can pull together a number of the resources we've all discussed and a number of the pieces that have been going up on the chat window. So we can send all of these resources and contact details as appropriate out to everybody on this call. So you can keep listening rather than having to scribble things down as we're talking about them or watching them go through the chat window. There's a question from Brendan Fitzgerald for you there, Teresa, around what sorts of things you might be thinking about or the government might be thinking about in terms of evaluation of these initiatives with NBN, and then how we might be able to use that moving forward for policy and advocacy work.
Yeah, we haven't got up to talking about that at this point in time, because really, like I said, we've been in constant conversation with them for 2 weeks before this about all the details on this, and we haven't actually got to that point. But clearly, we're starting to think about, well, how do we actually move this forward so that it doesn't finish on the 30th of September? The worst possible outcome, I think, from my perspective, would be if people that get a connection then can't continue the connection because they're unable to afford it, and we know that that's a distinct possibility if the assistance doesn't continue.
Yeah, great. And just I think there's a couple more questions for you, Teresa. I mean, just encourage people to ask any final questions as well for any of our panelists, and we can open it up in the last few minutes. Teresa, there's a question there from, I think it's probably linked to your comment just then on maybe what happens beyond the first 6 months, but talking about a householder decides to connect to the NBN, but if you've got a house that's full of families, lots of people living in the house or share households, kind of all of those scenarios where somebody might decide to link into one of these plans, kind of how would people then maintain this if families are coming and going, or what happens after the first 6 months, and whether some of those issues have been thought through.
I have to say they haven't been. One good thing is that there's a speed requirement, so it's the 25 speed, but it's not, and it's 5, so 25 down, 5 up, so it's not a really fast service. There is some discussion about, well, will that be sufficient for many children in one household? So that's clearly something that is out for further discussion, especially if multiple parties are doing video conference calls. But the other thing is that I was going to say here is that there's not a data limit on it, which is quite important, I think. So it's not a case of you're going to run up an unexpectedly high bill that you're going to have to manage, which I know has been an issue in similar sorts of households in the past. Yes, I think this is something that we do need to think about more, and we need to think about, there'll have to be all sorts of considerations in respect to the safety of the children using those services if different parties are supervising them, because obviously that's a concern generally for young children using using broadband. So I think that's definitely something that could have some more consideration about it. But I'm hopeful that there'll be other services that can come in and assist there, such as Be Connected and the E-Safety Commission. But I think that, we do need to really think about, the reality of how do you manage it if there are multiple parties managing the account. But anyway, I'm happy to hear more queries and suggestions there about what might work, and happy to take them forward to NBN.
That's great. Thank you, Teresa. Maybe one final question for you, and I think it's a couple that we might be able to open up to the panel, and it's from Wang, talking about assisting people in rental properties to get their residents registered on the NBN rollout list if it's missing from the map. But probably more generally, a question we often get is how people should get in contact with the NBN, given the normal path is through your retail service provider, through your telco, not directly to NBN. And I know you've been helping directly on the advocacy of some cases, but what is the path for people who think they need to contact NBN because of coverage issues or issues that can't be dealt with by their service providers?
Yeah, so this has come up, and David and I have been talking about this a little bit, what happens with the curly connections that are challenging, and maybe that's a reason why people haven't got the connection by the 1st of March. Look, I think that some of those cases may need to be handled directly with NBN, and we would be happy to, be the go-between for that, because I don't think there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of them, but there are definitely some that are extremely difficult. Quite often the retail service provider is already assisting with this. But if we've got a vulnerable family who have got no other connection, or are dependent on a mobile connection at the moment to do their education, then I think there's grounds to sort of really push a bit harder to get these resolved. We've also noticed that there's quite a few people who've had they've had a connection for some time, but it's a really poor connection. Suddenly they're all working from home, and maybe it's a low-income household, but a lot of users in the household, and they're suddenly struggling to get the usage and to manage that between themselves. And so there are materials to actually help with some of this, and some of it relates to actually just getting the telcos to take up the issue as a fault and to actually fix it. There has been a lot of improvements since the government brought out more standards in relation to line testing and speed testing. So if people have given up, 18 months ago or something, just encourage them to try again using the new provisions that are in place. We have seen some improvement. It doesn't solve everyone's problem, but some people's problems it will resolve.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much, Teresa, and thank you again for joining us. Maybe if people want to put in any final questions for our panelists, there's one I might put towards Jess Wilson, but it's a comment first from Robert Morcillo on Telstra's Shepparton project with 100 families, has a research component to sort of look at the costs and benefits. But that Robert also had a question, kind of be worth focusing in the current time on kind of people getting new connections and what's the economic benefit, like some of the Lloyd's work in the UK. So I'll pass it to Jessie. I know we were just talking about this the other day, and Jess Wilson was looking at how we might be able to measure some of the economic impact.
Yeah, look, I think that's certainly something I've been talking about for a number of years now. I know a lot of us here have been doing the same, and how important it is for us to talk about the economic impact of this, not just the social impact, but what does that actually mean for the economy of Australia? And that's certainly the words that the government needs to hear. And so I think that's something that we're really keen to work on, and we're looking at partners at the moment to pull together to do an economic impact of digital inclusion. I think though these times and the impact that we're having right now, with big decisions being made very quickly and new programs, like Teresa was saying, things happening over 2 weeks that would usually take 2 years potentially, it's really important that we're working together, I think, to look at the impact of those, and to look at how we evaluate those together, not just as individual programs, but what is the work that ACAN's been doing and NBN's doing and Telstra's doing and we're doing to make sure that there is digital inclusion, and what real difference that has made across the whole sector. So I think that's something that's really important as ADIA for us to be looking at how do we actually measure this well, so that we can continue to talk about the positive impact this has had on people's lives, and their ability to be able to fully participate in the economy of Australia. So I think that's something that we can work on together.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much, Jess. And we might we might wrap it up there. And again, a huge thank you to our panelists for joining us today. To Sally from who's been enjoying her Brown Brothers meal tonight, perhaps. To Jess Perrin, to Jess Wilson, and to Teresa. And for all of you online, for all of your questions and some fantastic comments and chats going through down the side where people have been answering questions from others, which is great, and lots of people saying thank you to the panelists as well. So please, yeah, stay engaged with us. Please feel free to drop us a line at the Australian Digital Inclusion Alliance at any point. As I said, kind of Ben will do a bit of a wrap-up email with some of the resources that we've all talked about and some of the contact points. And really encourage you from organisations to get behind some of the advocacy efforts going on. So Teresa mentioned the No Australian Left Online bit of work that's being done by ACAN, and I know there's about 50 organisations currently behind that work. I'm sure Teresa would like another 50 behind it. The Australian Digital Inclusion Alliance, Ishtar and Ben, are currently working on a letter to the Prime Minister in terms of some of the next steps and some of the next things we would like to see, and sustaining some of those initiatives. So those of you that are on the ADIA mailing list, please look out for that, for an opportunity to review and put your names to that. And if you're not on the ADIA mailing list, please go to our website, digitalinclusion.org.au, and sign up for that. But so thank you again, everybody, for joining today. I think, as I said before, it's been an incredible time over the last couple of months to see everybody from across the community and industry and government come together. So thank you for all that you're doing, and let's keep advocating strongly for what we're going to need beyond the immediate period. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again online. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.